Hi everyone, thanks for joining. My name is Chandra Majumdar. I'm an assistant professor of painting and drawing here. Some of you know me, some of you do not know me, some of you will know me. So just to kind of proceed introducing Andrea, Joyce, Heimer, I wanted to just kind of read something that I wrote, just thinking about maybe the last time I saw her paintings, which were at her studio. There was a lot of work in there. They were flying and going away to different places. And then just thinking about the impact of seeing the work in the space, but then slowing down and being able to take time and look at the work a little bit. So I'm just going to read something. And then I'll read like the official bio. Dense, full, now, look again, find, pick up, walk over, laugh, notice, surprise, talk back, leave, come back, run, hide, stop, remember, revisit, reimagine, again, all at once. Andrea Joyce Heimer is from Billings, Montana, and lives in Bellingham, Washington. The narrative paintings and drawings that she makes investigate the subject of loneliness, largely informed by autobiographical stories such as her own adoption, in order to examine how humans experience feeling alone. Her work has been covered in outlets including Art in America, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, New Yorker, New American Paintings, and the Huffington Post. Andrea has an MFA from the New Hampshire Institute of Art and is taught at the Oregon College of Art and Craft in Portland, Emily Carr in Vancouver, and Western Washington University, Bellingham, where I believe you still teach right now. Heimer was a 2019 recipient of the Joan Mitchell Foundation Painters and Sculptors Grant, a 2019 Betty Bowen Award finalist, and a 2018 Nettie Award finalist in painting, a 2015 recipient of the 5790 Projects Award, and a 2013 Nettie Award finalist in painting. Heimer is represented by Nina Meyer Gallery in LA and Half Gallery in New York. Her work has been included in international shows at Almain Rec in Paris, Pinakothèque de Moderne in Munich, and Nina Meyer in Brussels. In 2017, Heimer was one of 55 artists selected to participate in the 15th Istanbul Biennial. She's currently pursuing doctoral studies on alternative pedagogies in a post-secondary art education. This lecture is sponsored by the Painting and Drawing program here at the School of Art, History, and Design at UW. And with that, welcome.
Thank you. Introduction. I am so incredibly excited to be here today. This is the first in-person talk I've done in quite some time, so it's really nice to be back doing this kind of thing. Can everybody hear me okay? I haven't done one with a mask before. Can we get in the back? Good? Okay. So I have written every single thing that I'm going to say down. I have found that I'm not a good off-the-cuff speaker, so my apologies in advance for not making as much eye contact as I normally would if I were a more natural speaker. But yeah, I just want to thank you for having me, and a special thanks to you for inviting me. Really appreciate it. I'm really honored that you're spending some time with me. I know everybody's time is very precious. So that was a great introduction. I don't know how much I can add to that. I'm a narrative painter mostly. Started doing a little bit of drawing recently. I really do love teaching. I am teaching just a couple of classes here and there at Western Washington University in Bellingham, where I live. And as mentioned, I'm studying MFA programs specifically, and kind of how we can maybe change some of our approaches and help them to work better and sort of I just think that there's some room for improvement. So my PhD research is really about MFA programs and low residency models and other kinds of alternative models. So that's been really exciting and kind of taking up a lot of my brain space lately. So, I wanted to show you really quick, this is my studio where I'm currently working, and that's my studio assistant, Noki. This is very exciting. This is the first studio that I've ever had. And this is the inside. I work flat when I'm painting, and this kind of gives you a sense of the scale. My very wonderful friend is a contractor, and he built this studio over the pandemic based on this very rudimentary drawing that I provided him. So I'm very grateful for that space. This is where I'm from, Great Falls, Montana. I just actually returned from a trip to Montana. It was my first time there to my home state in, I think, 8 years at least. I have a show up right now at Missoula Art Museum. It's called Pastimes, and it's a group of new paintings and drawings, kind of thinking about what I used to do as a kid in Montana when I, quote unquote, wasn't doing anything. I was thinking about a lot of this kind of forced downtime in the past year and a half. It's felt really bad to me, and I kind of realized that as an adult, I'm not good at doing nothing anymore, but I used to be quite good at it. And so I wanted to really investigate and really think back to what I was actually doing when I didn't have any responsibilities, and so those are narrative paintings about that. I mentioned Montana specifically. My work is really autobiographical and deals a lot with my childhood growing up there. So a lot of my paintings are set in Montana, most of them. This is the show up in Missoula. It's not a great photo, but I'm going to talk for about 45 minutes today, I think, and there will be some time at the end for questions. I think the first thing I'm going to do is just show you some paintings just as an introduction, and then I'll kind of talk about the conceptual background, as in why I'm making these paintings, why I'm painting at all. And then I'll kind of, I think time-wise, I think we'll be okay. I'll talk a little bit about writing, the role of writing and title to my work, which is really important to me. And then I'll kind of share some process photos and kind of talk through how I make them, and then some influences at the end. So, this is the first title. I'm going to read it in a second. Just a couple of things as I'm kind of going through these first few paintings. The paintings I'm going to show you, I think there's 3 or 4 of them. They're all very recent, finished within the last couple of weeks. And just, I know it's hard to tell on a projector. They're all acrylic paint with oil, pastel, and pencil on top of the paint. And most of them are done on wood panels, a couple on canvas, but mostly wood. And they're between 40 by 60 and 60 by 80 inches, so fairly large for me anyway. They're very detailed and they don't translate well to projection, so I'll show some detail shots as well. And just for reference, as we're going through these, the figures in the images are usually about 7 inches tall, so about like that. The paintings do have elements that make them look collaged. I get that all the time, but I can assure you there's no paper involved. It's all paint. They're all paintings. And as I mentioned, lastly, the titles are very important. So I'll read the titles before I show you the paintings. So I typically work in groups of paintings. Like I'll do 10 kind of around a central theme. This one I'm going to show you is a rare one-off. It was done for an event coming up in Miami. It's called Marlene Ran a Beauty Parlor out of her house, and many transformations happened there, good and bad, with the Montana plains rolling into infinity out her pink-rimmed windows. So 18 by 24 inches, pretty small for me. Has anybody heard of Stiltsville in Miami? I hadn't either. So one person maybe. It's this group of structures that are built on stilts about a mile out from the Miami coast, and one of the galleries I work with is curating a group show out there. So that's the reason that this is so small, because it has to be put in a little boat and taken out to the venue. So anyway, I just thought that was funny. So this one. I was painting this right before I went on that Montana trip, and I was thinking a lot about transformations when I was making it, kind of as in my own transformation as a person since the last time I'd been home. And I was thinking about this beauty parlor in my hometown, kind of getting my hair cut by this woman named Marlene, who cut all of my family's hair. And I remember sitting there waiting for my mom to get her hair done and kind of watching these ranch women coming in and out, and they were there to get haircuts and perms and dye jobs to undergo kind of this transformation and then sort of go back into relative isolation back on their ranches. And I remember sitting there with my own hopes. As an adopted child, my hair was quite a bit different than my adoptive family's, and they were always commenting on it, how wild and kind of unruly it was. And I was always hoping with each new haircut that this would be the one, Marlene would get it just right, where my parents would stop making comments about it being so crazy. It never worked. So this painting is very typical, where it has a kind of an overarching narrative and then several small narratives kind of existing within. So there's this one of me getting my hair cut. And then we've got the women kind of coming in from outside, so that transition of kind of coming in from this rainy day and going into this warm pink space to kind of get made over. And then behind the beauty shop, we have this kind of transformation. On the left, you have the domesticated animals, the horses grazing, and then on the right, you have this scene where a mountain lion's attacking a deer, so you've got kind of that dual transformation happening. So the next two that I'm going to show you are also very recent, and they were made together. They're going to the same place. They're going to Miami for next month, and I knew that they would be hanging together in a booth, and I knew that the booths can get quite cramped. So I was thinking about them in relation to one another, so I knew that they'd be in close quarters. So both of them are about extreme weather, and again, I was painting these when I knew I had that trip to Montana kind of on the horizon, and I was thinking about the environment I grew up in and kind of the extreme weather shifts there and its effect on how people live. So this first one's called In the Valley. Every summer the wildfires wrapped us in smoke and ash and burned our noses, but it was also summer, so we sunbathed and went about most things in the normal way. So in Montana, every summer the wildfires happen, and when I lived in Missoula, it was a bowl-shaped valley, and when that happens, the smoke kind of gets stuck in that bowl. It's really awful. It's like living in a campfire or something. You kind of can't get away from it. So, and every year it's getting worse, unfortunately. So this painting is about kind of the horror and the violence of those summer wildfires, and then us just kind of going about our lives as if nothing were wrong. I thought it was also kind of a metaphor for a lot of things, like a lot of how we deal with trauma. So again, a lot of small narratives happening within big narratives. So in this first house, that's my mother, and she's vacuuming ash off the carpet. She's always cleaning. And then next door, we've got the neighbors fighting while their kids are outside, kind of throwing the ball around. This is my friend and I sunbathing, just trying to get a nice tan amidst all this. And then, somebody just walking their dog and watering the lawn to try and keep up this kind of manicured appearance of the lawn while everything is in flames around them. You can kind of see the deer, the wildlife that are surrounding the town kind of fleeing from their homes. And this is the helicopter that's dumping water on the fires. And these are they're just kind of in the sky all the time during the wildfires, so it's just kind of their background noise. And this is a photo of Missoula when it's on fire, just to kind of give you a perspective of how close it is to the town and how you just kind of just deal with it. And there's the helicopters dumping water. So this next one, again, was made to coincide with this one, again, about extreme weather. So it takes place in Great Falls, Montana, where I grew up. Great Falls is located on the plains, and there's nothing around it, so the wind just rips through the city all the time. It doesn't matter what time of day, it doesn't matter what season it is, it's very rare to have a still day. So I can't think about my childhood without just thinking about the howling wind and like drying out your skin and drying out your eyes. Not even being able to have like a picnic or anything, even when it's sunny, because things just get blown away. So this one's called On the Plains of Montana, at least where I live. The wind howled morning, noon, and night, and we lived through it and around it, between ghostly howls, through school days, long summers, long winters, and even dances at the Black Eagle Community Center. So this painting is kind of just about that idea of you know, living in this kind of wind tunnel and just knowing that, you know, getting all gussied up for a dance or something, and then knowing the second that you walk out the door, like everything, your hair, everything is just, you might as well have not done it. And just kind of watching the trees sort of bend to the wind, this force of wind, to just constantly dealing with like debris and tumbleweeds, just always in motion around you. And kind of even being indoors and thinking about how you have to turn up the music extra loud because of the howling wind outside, kind of drowns it out a bit. And like if you want to have a conversation outside, a private conversation, you definitely have to do it in your car. And then this is happening in the lower right of that painting. This is my friend who got upset with someone else at this particular dance and is letting the air out of a tire of this person. And I wanted to include this because I liked the thought of this very windy scene happening, and then my friend like stabbing this tire and kind of making her own little wind sound off in the corner, and this air escaping the tire. Oh, and then this is a photo of the actual Black Eagle Community Center as it looks now, and now they have bowling, which is pretty awesome. And this is just outside of Great Falls where the wind has actually blown these over, just to give you some idea. So those are kind of the last couple of paintings that I've worked on, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the conceptual background of my art practice, as in why I'm compelled to paint in the first place, and what the paintings are actually about. So a little bit of background on the background is that I've always been a drawer and interested in expressing myself visually, but I didn't start painting with any kind of regularity until about 2012. I didn't attend like any kind of undergrad program for art, so prior to that, my last formal art education was just in high school. Around 2011, I started suffering from pretty bad clinical depression that was affecting my ability to want to keep existing. So around this time, long story short, I was seeing a therapist, and he suggested that I try making some art, just an element. And so I did. I tried some oil portraits. I tried doing some watercolors of people that I knew and animals and other things, and the whole thing just felt really uninspiring. Stylistically, I had no idea who I was or what I was doing, and I just didn't know what to make art about. So kind of, I tried this suggestion, but it ended up making me feel a little bit worse, to be honest. But throughout all that, kind of like, I don't know how to describe it, in the background in my head, there was kind of this little tingle when it came to art making, and I think probably somebody in this room can kind of relate to this, where it's kind of this poking of like, yeah, you should make something, even though I didn't know what to make, I didn't know how to make it. It was just kind of this little like poking at me. So finally, my therapist asked me if I ever thought about making really personal art, as in like making something about what we were actually discussing in therapy. And a little information on that. So as mentioned, I'm an adopted person. I was adopted as a baby into a family that already had one biological child. And the entire experience had just a huge effect on my personhood and just my life in general. And in the 80s, when I was born, closed adoptions, at least in Montana, were very common. And closed adoptions mean you don't have access to any biographical information. I don't have access, my adoptive parents don't, no one does. and you can't get it. Like the records are sealed, and it's just, you have to deal with it. And without kind of going into the gory details, my adoptive family and I were never close, right from the beginning. There was definitely a void there. So this piece of paper on the screen is the only information that was given to my adoptive parents and then was given to me when I was a little older. And as you can see, it is just enough information to be kind of just infuriatingly unhelpful. And I was grateful to have it, but it was a little bit, I felt like it was a little bit of a slap in the face to give this to someone and nothing else. And you know, when I got older and I started looking into this, I found that the laws vary by state for adoptions, but really all of them that deal with close adoptions are kind of these remnants of this kind of these patriarchal laws that were designed originally to, quote, protect the marital viability of like young unwed mothers or other women who were pregnant kind of outside of the accepted scenarios. And a lot of them just haven't been changed. So I'm part of some groups who are working to change state legislation to unseal those records. But all that is to say, my adoptive parents were not, I think, ready for the process, and they didn't understand how to help me, and they kept it a secret from me until I was in second or third grade. And they told me, we never talked about it again, even to this day we don't talk about it, and I got no help for it. So by the time I was in my 20s, all of this kind of feeling of being an outsider and a black sheep had really piled up, and it just kind of hit me, and I think that's where the depression and the anxiety was coming from. So back to the therapist's question, how I thought about making art that was really personal and about what I was actually going through. Yes, I had, but I had a million excuses why I did not want to do that. And I don't know if you guys want to hear them or not, but I bet some of them sound familiar. Knowing what I know now, I don't think that they're entirely unique to me. So here's some of them. I was untrained. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to make anything that looked good. And at the time, my definition of looking good meant rendering something photorealistically. I felt a lot of shame around how lonely I felt, and I was afraid that if I painted about feeling like an outsider, that people would think less of me. Because I was married at the time, I had great friends, I had a good life, but it was all the more embarrassing to admit that I was struggling, especially in this really visual way. I was also afraid someone in my family would catch wind of what I was doing and get upset with me, and just the list goes on why I didn't want to make this work. But in the end, I did try, and I did about 5 small paintings, and something about it, I don't know, something about it made me feel better. It was kind of this, I don't want to sound too woo-woo, but it was kind of this magic moment of something about like taking that kind of melancholy and the discord and all the sadness and arranging it within a picture plane where I had complete control over all of the pieces. There was something in that made me feel better. So painting became a way for me to really spend time with these memories and feelings that were weighing really heavy on me. Just something about the physicality of rearranging those pieces. So this is very embarrassing, but I will show you one of those first 5 paintings that I made in 2012. This one's called Claustrophobia on Maple Street. It's 11 by 14. This is what it looks like. So it's interesting looking back through some of this work that's almost 10 years old at this point. I'm still painting the same things, I just have different methods. This one is me in my childhood bedroom. I'm naked in the corner, so both exposed and covering myself. And, you know, I'm using all of these things, like this kind of, these really kind of fit this patterning that made me feel really trapped. My mom had this way of decorating that was lots and lots of patterns all kind of thrown together, and it felt really oppressive to me. And this is another thing that comes up in my paintings even now, is stuffed animals. I use them as kind of a symbol. They they kind of are stand-ins for like the companionship that I wish that I'd had, and they're also kind of these silent witnesses. And I also use mirrors a lot, even now in my work, kind of this way, both in the Lacanian sense that interesting to see yourself as the other, but also this visual way of kind of reflecting space and just underscoring that sometimes these rooms really feel prison-like. Sometimes you feel trapped in a room or in a situation. So this next one, I believe you might have seen this one. My animal companions filled the house and my life and all of our conversations. This is a very recent painting I did for the Armory show for Half Gallery. And I wanted to show you because it's dealing with a lot of the same things that one of those first paintings was, and even the same color palette to a certain extent. So what's happening in this house is it's kind of a conglomeration of a lot of different memories that I have from growing up. And in my family, we didn't talk to each other that much, but we always had pets. And my parents have this really weird way of like focusing all of their attention and their conversation skills on the pets and kind of talking through them. So I was thinking a lot about animals and kind of the roles that they play in our family dynamic. So this painting is about that. There it is in the booth, kind of in the middle to give you a sense of scale. But we've got the stuffed animals again. In this case, they are watching these kids learn about sex by watching lions hump on TV. So they're kind of bearing witness to this sort of pivotal moment in these kids' lives. Again, we've got the figure that's like partially exposed, partially covered. And again, like lots of crazy patterning to kind of reinforce the sort of trapped feeling, the claustrophobic feeling of this home environment. So talking a little bit about titles, I've read you a couple of them now, so you kind of get a sense of them. They're diaristic in a way, like maybe something you'd read from somebody's journal. And I can tell you that when I think about memories or subjects or moments that I want to process through painting, I think about it in words first. So I'll describe the scene kind of to myself in words. And if it's a really long title, I'll write it down, but otherwise I just hold it up there and start thinking about the visuals. And I think when I first started making this autobiographical work that began with the description, I was trying to think of a way so that those words would be permanently attached to the visuals that I was making. And just pragmatically speaking, it made sense to me to make that written description into the title so that it would always be connected with the painting itself. And I've experimented a lot over the years with how to do that, and a lot of times, up until pretty recently, I've done that by writing the titles on the wall in pencil next to the painting during the exhibition. It's pretty, it's kind of this unobtrusive way where, you can really ignore them if you want. They're not that visible, but they are there. And I think that the words were really important to me, and it was important to me that they stayed with the painting because part of the benefit, I think, of me making this work was dealing with the depression of not feeling heard all these years, and so I didn't ever feel like I could talk about this stuff. So when I started showing it, when I started getting the work in front of people, there was this moment that would happen where someone would be looking at the painting, they'd look, they'd read the title, they'd go back to the painting. And there was something really, really important in that where I think it was just this moment of a stranger just hearing me out for 1 second. That's all they needed to do. And I was so grateful for that small action, and there was something that was really healing for that. It just became really, really important. So I experimented a lot with the titles. I did this, I wrote them on the wall. Sometimes I would do regular labels. I experimented with not including the titles at all in some exhibitions. During my graduate show, I wrote the titles really large as part of a timeline that directed the viewer through the paintings in a certain way. I've done QR codes, all kinds of things. And I think the reason that I bring it up specifically in a situation like this, when I'm talking to students, is that there are times when I've had to be very adamant about their inclusion exhibition. The biennial that was mentioned in the introduction was a really great example where that was a huge, to give you an idea of why it's sometimes a problem for people, and I totally get that. I won't read that one. But when I got to Turkey and I walked into the room of my paintings, I saw that at the last minute they had decided to include the titles, and they got someone to write them both in English and in Turkish. And when I had a chance to talk to them one-on-one, they just said, you know, in the end you were right. We wanted to honor your vision, and that was so incredible and important to me. But I did have to explain to them, and I've had to explain to other people that these paintings have a job. Like whatever they do in the quote unquote like art world, they have a job for me that is confessional, that's helping me through something. And part of that is the text, and part of that is the viewer hearing me and reading the text, looking at the visuals. And without that piece, it feels, I think I described it to them as it feels like the paintings are unplugged. Like it feels like unplugging a radio. Yeah, they're still nice to look at, but it's not, they're not doing the job that I want them to do, which I think is important. So a positive thing out of kind of all these conversations with gallerists and curators and the like is that it's helped me really clarify to myself what my paintings are doing, what their job is, and why I want them exhibited the way that I do. And I bring it up, again, only to underscore for students and people who are just beginning to work with other people concerning their art, that if there is something about your work that keeps coming up as a conversation point, and it's probably in critiques, like these titles came up in critiques in my MFA program, if there's something that keeps coming up, it's a quirk, it's a choice, it's an area of meaning specific to you, it's something that people are questioning, that's okay, but just get really clear on it for yourself. Understand the function of it in your work, understand the job that your work is trying to do and how this piece relates to it, and be able to talk about it forwards and backwards so that you were able to communicate that to someone else in a really succinct, confident, professional way. It's just a little bit of advice that I had to learn the hard way. So since we're talking about titles, and that's kind of where I start, just really quick through the process of making a painting. So it starts with the title, I kind of get some visuals in my head, and then I make a drawing. And when I say I make a drawing, I don't like make a good drawing, I make one of these drawings. This is probably the size of a Post-it, done with a marker, usually has some esoteric notes written to myself that I cut out of this picture. I make a lot of paintings, and so my process is pretty streamlined at this point. So I get title, get the visuals in my head, do this, and then I start painting. I don't like to do too much more planning than that, because if I have this sketch and I have the title in my head, those are like enough to light my way, and then the rest I kind of want to be feeling around in the dark, because part of the fun of painting for me is like this unfolding of an image, this unfolding of a story, and I want a little risk in there. Like all the time they don't work out and I throw them away, so I like that little bit of danger associated with wasting a bunch of my time. So this is the sketch for the painting that I showed you a couple slides ago. It kind of looks like it. Okay, this is a secret that I'm going to tell you all, but I don't want it to go beyond this room. I think we might have talked about this maybe. So a lot of times I'll be all ready to go, and I'll have a color palette in mind because the memory is very crisp. And then sometimes that color palette does not materialize in my head. There's nothing more frustrating than being ready to go with everything else, but not knowing what color to make something. Just transports you back to like elementary school, not knowing this most basic fundamental starting point. And honestly, when that happens, I Google free color palette generator. This is my favorite one. It's called Coolers. And I just hit generate over and over and over again until something pops up and I'm like, ah, that's brilliant. And then I use that. yeah, I don't know why I feel slightly I've told maybe 3 painter friends about this trick, and every single one of them has just been aghast. Like, is it okay to swear? Can I say one swear word? My very good friend said, "That's what you do when you're stuck. Are you fucking kidding me?" So I don't know. I think it's helpful, so I'm passing that along to you in case it was helpful. So once all that's in place, then I start our layering process, and it's really like setting a stage. Again, I work flat. I do like the sky. I do all of the, if there's some mountains in this one. I did the building on top, and it's just a layering process. I think that, I guess it's important to talk about my tape situation. I tape every single edge. Crisp, clean lines are really, really important to me. So my entire studio, usually every surface looks like this. I use Scotch tape. If I need a curved line, I'll cut it with scissors, and I'll make like a one-use only, like circular sticky stencil out of that tape. So it takes me forever to make anything. And I've just gotten so used to it that it's kind of that process of cutting and taping and things is really ingrained in me. And I use it a lot of different ways, like going back to this painting, I'll mask things off, like the floor, for example. Each one of those boards is masked off separately so that I can get a different wood grain in there by swirling the paint. And those, I think when dealing with work that's like this flat and 2D and really doesn't have much perspective, I think integrating a lot of different textures is really important. So this is one about making out in the graveyard as a teenager, and so I've taped off the headlights and used sponge painting to get the headlight effect and kind of in the stone of the tombstones. And then also, this is another recent painting about migration season, and in addition to kind of this taping off and the layering process, I'll also do something to loosen it up where I'll really water down my acrylic paint so that I can get some kind of elements that are see-through. So I've used those for clouds and smoke and that kind of thing. So it kind of introduces this little bit of looseness to this very geometric, graphic, kind of precise shapes. And I use it for doing some shadows and things like that. And I've also very recently started to use the oil pastel and the pencils on top, again to introduce a little bit more, just a little bit more of the hand, a little bit more, just looseness to them. They were starting to look very geometric, and I needed a little something extra. Here's just some examples of using shadow and using that mark making together. This is another recent one, my cowboy cousins at golden hour, dipping quickly in spring water with danger surrounding, a place east of the Rocky Mountains. And there's the sketch. There's me starting just the layering process. And then this is it finished, just to give you an idea of how many layers are involved. There are a lot. And this is kind of an angled photo of the surface, so you can kind of see the layering process. Again, working flat to kind of facilitate the taping. And last but certainly not least, this is the paint that I use. I absolutely love it. I've turned countless painters onto it. It is not artist paint, it is craft paint. You can get it at Joann's or really any big box store. It dries matte, so you can draw very easily on top of it. It's fantastic. I absolutely love it. I've used it since I was a child, and that's when I started painting. I just had a box of it, and I never moved on from it. I love it a lot. So in kind of thinking through the process, I just wanted to take you through just a brief stylistic evolution. One of the questions that I get from students a lot, mostly BFA students, is your style is really recognizable, which is a nice compliment, very nice to hear. How did you get there? And the really unpopular answer is like, well, I made a lot of paintings, and a lot of them were very bad. But I think as you all probably know, there's a thing that happens when you keep working with the same ideas where organically things change. It's kind of like comparing your handwriting now to what it was, when you were in first grade. You can't pinpoint where you were making decisions to make it look like it does now, but it just gets there. So looking through this old work, I was kind of looking at my figures. The figures are really important to me. Literally within the narrative scope. Sometimes they're me or my family or friends. Sometimes they're extras in the painting, or sometimes they act as these sort of witnesses or observers to whatever scene is playing out. So really, they're the element that I think I've struggled with the most in representing them in a way that's both individualistic, like I want each one to have its own personality, but I also want them cookie cutter enough where I can kind of plug them in as part of a crowd, or I can kind of make them into whatever I want. So starting with that 2012 claustrophobia painting, here's all the way to 2016. You can kind of see me. I was in grad school somewhere in there. I was kind of experimenting. In 2017, I was going through some really hard stuff, and during this year, I made my figures very muscular and beefy because I felt like I needed some muscle on my side. So all of them have these tiny heads and these big, bulky bodies. And then 2018, they're starting to look more like what they look like now. This is when I discovered Scotch tape. If you can tell, they're very geometric and graphic. This is a very good friend of mine passed away, so this is him giving an autopsy. He always wanted to be in one of my paintings, so now he is. And he would find this funny. It's not weird. It sounded weird when I said it, so I got self-conscious for a minute. 2019, they're looking a lot more like what they do now, but this is when I was using tape. I was really going crazy with the tape, but no mark making in there, so it looked, the comment that I was getting from my gallery was these kind of look like they could almost be computer generated in a way, but I don't see much of your hand in there. And this, again, kind of continuing in the same way, pre-COVID. Then during COVID, I started this project where I did a lot of drawings, and I ended up working with my gallery who supported this project, where I did 50 drawings during the first 50 days of lockup in Bellingham. So I did a drawing every day, and I was using oil pastel and alcohol markers. And I don't know, there's something about that, having that daily deadline that really pushed me to be completely loose and free, and it was a totally different way of working than this meticulous taping. And it really loosened up just everything. I found a lot of joy in it. I really had a good time making these. These are some details. It's funny looking at them now, because I remember at the time, I knew that I was going to have to give these to my gallery, but I was actually kind of embarrassed of them because they were so loose and so different from what I had been doing, and they were just not planned out and just kind of wild, and I was really nervous about the reception of them, but it ended up being pretty good. And then even though no one could go to it, they hung them all and had an exhibition, which was nice, and then made them into a book. So now I have them always, which is really lovely. But then when it was time to return back to painting, I thought there's got to be a way to kind of combine these two things, the geometric, very precise taping that I'm doing that I really like, with that looseness and kind of that joy that I was finding in mark making. So I did a painting, and then over the top, I would do the mark making part. So this is a detail from kind of one of my first attempts to blend those together. This painting is just about me feeling like I was fighting with myself over and over and over again during COVID. And then this is very recent, so going back to the figure, showing now how I'm kind of integrating those two, the drawing and the painting together. This is again from the Armory show. This is about me and my high school boyfriend sneaking off to have sex in a wheat field while there's cows moving in the distance. And then this is just fun to see the side by side, kind of same subject matter, but completely different. So it's, again, embarrassing, but kind of interesting. And then this is just an example of another one that I did from that time where I was like really full force, like bringing in the drawing and just kind of just like really enjoying the chaos of it. Then really quickly at the end, I know influences, some people like to hear them, some not. I feel like it's kind of like talking about what you have for lunch. It's like if you're hungry, it's nice to hear, but otherwise, you know. So this is Charlie Russell. He was a painter in the American West. He actually spent quite a bit of time in Great Falls, which is where I'm from, and it was kind of the first art that I was exposed to, where someone in elementary school took me to see his work and said, "This is art." And so it's all these narratives about kind of cowboy life and Native Americans and lots of landscapes and things like that. And he also did a lot of writing. He published some stories to go along with these. Then also ledger drawings, another thing growing up in Montana. These were kind of ubiquitous. And again, another thing that I was introduced to really early on, where I was like, this is art. This is an art form. So ledger art is narrative drawings that are done by Plains Indians, done on ledger paper. Kind of when colonization started to happen, this kind of work was previously done on buffalo hides, and then as that became more scarce and things like ledger paper and regular paper started to be introduced to the area, they started kind of switching tack and working on this new medium. And then, there's tons of archives of these online that are really interesting and sad and kind of, beautiful to look through. But again, very narrative, and just, I was totally enthralled with these as a child. And really, some of the only art that I could go stand in front of in Montana was ledger drawings. Another really impactful one, the unicorn tapestries. I had a book about them as a child. I don't know. I feel like I used to think that everyone knew about them, but maybe not. But they were made in the late 1400s. No one really knows who made them or why. It's very mysterious. There's 7 of them. They're huge, as you can see. And it's they all go together, and it's a narrative about a group of hunters who are chasing a unicorn. And I was completely obsessed with this book as a child. So now every time I go to New York, near New Oysters, even if it's a really short trip, I make it a point to go and look at these tapestries. And it's just, I remember the first time I did it, I had the whole room to myself. I just like wept. So they're so beautiful and mysterious and just tragic, and they're just absolutely incredible. They've got all of these details that are just so fascinating. Grandma Moses, just a folk painter, didn't start painting until her late 70s. What is really interesting about her, she paints these rural kind of scenes of life, but they all feel very joyful. And I know that sounds like a very simplistic way to describe somebody's work and a reason to return to it again and again, but actually in thinking about it, I don't think it's that easy to paint a joyful painting. I think it's actually really hard. And I think that's why these paintings are so incredible, is that every single one of them was joy, and I just can't think of that many people who can do that, so I find it really fascinating. And then Henry Darger, huge influence, janitor in Chicago, lived a very lonely life, ended up writing this 15,000-page manuscript about these child soldiers, and then did a couple hundred drawings and paintings illustrating it. The work was not discovered until after he died. I've seen a lot of his work in person. It's really interesting because it's double-sided. He was using paper as much as he could, so he worked on both sides. So when they're displayed, they're in these glass frames that you can walk around so that you can see both sides. And there's just something about this artist creating this entire world for himself. He interjected himself into the story, and that's where he lived. And there's something that is so tragic and beautiful and incredible about that. This is one of the longest manuscripts ever written. It's in the Guinness book. It's not published because it's unpublishable, but just this incredible piece of work that he made just for him. the pictures are amazing, but just the entire thought of that just makes me speechless and just breathless. It's incredible. Anytime you get to see this in person, definitely go check it out. And then one contemporary artist, Carol Dunham, I absolutely love. I know people have strong feelings about his work, but so there's something about like the playing with perspective and the figure and the humor and just the immediacy of them that it's just, it never stops being interesting to me. Just one of my absolute faves.
What's his name?
Carol Dunham.
Oh, Carol.
Yeah. Absolutely incredible. And then because they don't fit anywhere else in this presentation, I started doing just plain graphite drawings just very recently. And I actually really like them. I think they're pretty good. I'm very excited about this. I've been thinking about doing this for a long time, but taking all the color away was totally intimidating to me, and it makes me feel really naked, like I don't know what I'm doing. But I've been really, really digging making these. I just wanted to throw them up. And that is all. Thank you so much.